Antigone was what we read over the weekend. Did we talk about this? Have anybody being pissed when you read Antigone?
Yeah,
and nobody seemed all that pissed.
But I don't think any of us were angry. Yeah. I thought we were confused a little bit. With the chorus.
Yeah,
with the
hated the chorus.
Yeah.
Now, when you go back and read it again without the chorus,
it makes sense.
It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah, it does.
I was like, oh, I got this.
I don't know if I.
It's just they talk funny.
I think I did use the example of like if say Popular Mechanics had somebody in the middle talk about Solomon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or it's like you're watching, I don't know, Game of Thrones or something, and then some dude comes on the screen like midway through the show and is like sings like a song like on a guitar or something. He's like ding 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 ding.
I would not.
One step, and he like goes through this whole like song because there's actually. It's not that unintelligible when you read the chorus after you've already understood the plot. Like if you just read the plot first, then you go back and you check out like what is the chorus saying. What an ass. I mean, I didn't even mark the damn page. Where is Antigone? Does anybody know?
It's 9:23.
9:23. Thank you all so much. Okay. So I started marking because I got the plot was fine with Antigone talking to Ismene and then like all that stuff. Once we get past that part though, we have Creon comes in and he gives us his part, and then it's 9:30. The chorus really doesn't come in and start doing like all kinds of crazy stuff, but it made it a lot easier if I tried to like categorize everything the chorus was saying.
9:33.
Yeah, 9:33 when the chorus comes in and they start doing a lot of stuff there. I essentially just labeled on the next page. See, like I just put a big old bracket and said "man." It's like that's really all it is. I mean, I figured out what it is. Like probably the best comparison is like if you go home and you're like, you know what I'm gonna do? Let's say your preacher does this. Our preacher doesn't do this, but if the preacher did, actually he might sometimes. I just don't ever do it. But a preacher tells you, guys, next Sunday we're gonna be talking about this chapter and this verse and like this stuff in the Bible. So like read up. And so you're supposed to like read and you come to the sermon next week. But like it's like reading the Bible and it's like say like Old Testament or something. It's like plot points and you're like this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. Like, okay, got it. Bingo, no big deal. But the chorus bit is almost like when the preacher gives a sermon on something. He's not just telling you like the preacher's not
reading it word for word.
Right. I mean, you don't usually have a preacher who gets up there and says like, all right, guys, let's talk about the story of David, and then you're like, okay, here we go. And then what he does is just says, David was born, and he goes through the whole David story, and then he's like, and that's today's lesson. You're like, what? No. You need commentary. You want context. You want, what does this tell us about morals? What does this tell us about what our relationship with God is? That's what the chorus's function is essentially supposed to be, like little mini sermons as we go. And I think part of it, too, was that it's kind of meant to be this sort of contextualizing thing for the crowd seeing all this. This person talks and this person talks. It's back and forth. They're like, But then I think even the chorus, when they come in and talk, they do it like almost in song fashion. You can see how it was almost laid out like a song.
Well, it is called a chorus.
Right.
So.
Did you know it's crazy as Sophocles is the one he was the first one to like narrow it down to like say 10 to 15 guys.
Mm-hmm. That's what it says in the book.
It used to be like 50.
Yeah, that's what it says in the book.
Oh, it says that in this book?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I read it. I just know I read it. And what did it say? I guess they said here then too. If it mentioned the chorus, it probably mentioned that he was the guy who went, hey, what about instead of just 2 people on stage? Listen to me.
Mm-hmm. That's
3? That's in here too.
Mm-hmm. That's about how he's like one of the tragedy people or whatever.
Yeah, he's a great innovator. I believe they also mentioned in this book that the first time that this was put on was like, is it 441 BC, I think?
Yep.
Which I think is quite interesting because that means that technically this play was put on before either of its
predecessors.
Yeah. And I think that he actually he would write them and then he would put them on. So while we call these 3 plays the Theban plays, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone, I guess that means technically he wrote Antigone first. So it's like he wrote Antigone, then he wrote the prequels.
So yeah, he wrote the ending and then. I mean, that makes sense to a lot of people do that.
It makes sense to me
You come
because
up with the ending first and then you come up with all the content.
Oh, I wonder when he put out Oedipus at Colonus, because I actually feel when I read that one I go, I don't like this one as much as the others. Like I like Antigone and I like Oedipus. They're both stories of pride. Oedipus at Colonus, I don't like as much. It'd be weird if you put the second one out first, then the sequel, then the prequel.
Okay. You're jumbling everything.
I'm not jumbling everything up. I mean, we're talking about this as reality. I mean, essentially, if you think about it, what?
Avengers series, like, is that in order?
No. No. If you watch the trailer for the most recent Avengers movie, well, I mean, first of all, you've got Iron Man happened first, right?
Yeah.
Then you had Captain America come along at some point, and Captain America's in the past. He's like in the, what, the 50s, 40s?
Yeah.
Then it comes back up to, modern day, I think. Does it come to modern day in that film, though? So it does kind of like a little flashback first, then it comes back. But then you've got, like, even in the Thor movie, you realize technically what you're watching, some of it's taking, like, place way in the past.
This one says... Just kidding. Never mind.
Does it say when Oedipus at Colonus was produced?
Yeah. It says the first performance was 401 BC.
Of Oedipus at Colonus?
Mm-hmm.
What about Oedipus the King? Because that may be completely wrong then. I just find it very strange that... Because I could have sworn... Damn it, where's the...
Oh.
What?
You're right. So the colonist one comes out first, then Oedipus the King, then Antigone. Wait, is that the right order?
I don't know. What are you using Wikipedia?
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do? Put Theban plays?
I literally just Googled the name of the place.
Oh, each one?
Mm-hmm.
Sophocles.
Oedipus the King.
Because I'll tell you right now, I am not a tragedian. What?
It says it right here that Antigone was first produced in 441, more than a decade before Oedipus the King.
Oh, damn it. Are you serious? God, just read the damn book, Nichols.
Exactly.
See, it's interesting because you have these questions later, and I don't know about y'all, but when I read like the informational text beforehand, I go like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then later I have a question, I'm like, where could I find this information?
Yeah.
So where did you say that was? At 441, more than a decade before Oedipus the King. But it still doesn't mention Oedipus at Colonus. But you said Oedipus at Colonus was 401?
Yeah, but it says right here that Oedipus the King is 429 BC. So how could that be a decade before?
I guess that means he wrote the worst one last. Because remember that it all works in reverse. Before. So that means Oedipus at Colonus came out last, which I don't like that play as much. That's very strange. So is Antigone and Oedipus... I guess that's how most writers are anyway. Like if y'all ever notice like films, like Steven Spielberg's making Jaws, and you're like, whoa, Jaws, that's good. And then like later he's making Jurassic Park. You're like, whoa, that's like better. And now he's making like... What was that movie he made like about the Germans, like World War II? And it was like...
Meh.
I mean, he's making like Ready Player One, which you're like, oh, it's okay.
But it's not.
But he's not making freaking Jurassic Park anymore. He just doesn't do that kind of stuff. Once CGI came out, we realized that most of what we liked about Steven Spielberg was he's so good at coming up with practical ways of putting effects on screen and making those things seem so real. And once computers came out, it's kind of like George Lucas. Everybody's like, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. A couple years, Return of the Jedi is kind of weird, like kid stuff. And then you like watch the new ones, like with the Clone War, like not the Clone Wars, like Anakin Skywalker, he's young, and you're like, how did they have more advanced weaponry and ships prior to Star Wars?
Oh.
This pisses me off.
Hey, I just found out some more
Yeah.
information.
What?
The Oedipus at Colonus. So it was actually written.
Keep in mind, this is Wikipedia.
It was actually written before his death in 406, but it wasn't. It was produced by his grandson in 401.
Interesting.
So he didn't actually produce it.
Did you know it's only one of... He produced apparently more than 100 plays. 100
But
plays.
there's like very few left because a lot of them weren't complete.
7.
Yeah.
All we have is 7 full plays. So I mean, I usually assume, for the most part, that the ones that make it are the really good ones. Usually. And so, yeah, you'd hope. Like the ones that are really well known. So Oedipus the King is his probably biggest one. Antigone is probably next. But it makes sense to me that like it wasn't until his grandson produced it that he even got... You said grandson?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord. That actually got produced. Oh, that means that this was... I guess this was produced prior to... Antigone was produced prior to the Peloponnesian War. Are y'all familiar with the Peloponnesian War?
No.
May or may not be. But essentially what happened was it was like... where are the 300 people from? Where are they from? The 300, Was it?
Sparta.
Sparta.
I was about to say, you're talking about what 300 people, but then I started thinking about it.
I don't think this is quite the exact same thing as like what happens in the movie The 300. It's not. It's like that Sparta like was pissed off about stuff that Athens was doing, and so there was some of their like I don't know. Imagine like freaking Dallas County was at war with like Austin County, and some little town in the middle, like not even like a big thing as big as Waco, like something like I don't know, like one of the little tide towns or something, like Nacogdoches or something, like ends up pissing off one of the Austin people, and then like they're like, we're going to war. That was kind of how it was, like a little town, like a sub town somewhere that was under like Athenian rule did something bad to a little Spartan town, and so they ended up starting a whole war between Athens and Sparta. The thing was that Sparta was essentially their whole economy was wrapped up in themselves, like they did everything for them, like within their wall. Athens, their main thing was like that they had ships to go out and like trade with other nations. And so they were impregnable. I mean, they had ships and they had a wall that covered the whole, like all the way to the ocean. So Sparta just basically sat outside the walls for like a couple of years. And what ended up changing the war for Sparta and what ended up giving them like a leg up in the war was some plague came in with like a shipment of grain. Athens ends up getting like all sick and starts dying, and the Spartans essentially just waited them out because the Spartans, they grew their own grain. They didn't trade with anybody, so like they didn't end up getting, none of them got sick. Only the people who were in the walls of Athens, like hundreds of thousands of people, were getting sick. So Oedipus was essentially produced as kind of a response to that. I mean, the whole thing starts with a plague, but this is all prior. This is like when everything's going great in Athens is when Antigone was produced. So that is kind of interesting, I think. This is before things got really bad, whereas Oedipus is when things did get really bad. And everybody's like, well, what do we do? What do we do? That's when he writes Oedipus.
And then everybody died.
Huh?
And then everybody died.
A lot of people die in Oedipus. One person doesn't die in Oedipus.
Well, one person
It's
doesn't
Creon.
die in Antigone.
Like Creon does not die in Oedipus.
Yeah, he doesn't die in Antigone either.
Actually, a lot of people don't die. I mean, obviously, Eteocles, and I was thinking about the Peloponnesian War and started thinking about Pericles, and I can't remember the name of the second son. What's his name? The one she wants to bury.
Polynices, yeah.
Polynices, thank you. Did y'all get like why this was even like why she was so pissed?
Mm-hmm.
Did they explain it really well? I mean, I had to kind of go back and read just to kind of remember, and I was, I think I was listening to like a podcast that like is an old podcast that I sometimes listen to as like a summary of it, but it was essentially like, for those who didn't catch it, but it was like I don't even mention Oedipus at Colonus events. So in Oedipus at Colonus, or I think it was like common knowledge maybe, that was essentially what happens was, this is Oedipus's great idea when I don't know if you know this, but y'all have heard of Oedipus before, right? He's the one that had sex with his
mom,
married her. The thing is, he had no idea that was happening. In fact, Oedipus was living in Corinth. The book Corinthians you've heard of, like
Mm-hmm.
it was the same city that Paul wrote to at like some other time, but in Corinth, Oedipus was living, and he goes to like the Apollo shrine or whatever, like he like some prophet says, you will kill your father and you will marry your mother and you will have children by her, and he's like, oh, screw this, nuh-uh. He's like, what's the best way to protect my family? What is the best way to protect my family? Leave them. He's like, if I just get as far away as I can, then I won't end up having sex with my mom and my dad. So he goes over to this other kingdom. On his way there, like he gets sort of attacked. So he's a great fighter because he's the son of the king over here. So he kills them all that he gets in a fight with. And he arrives in the city and they're having a plague. And they're like, we don't know what to do. Like this Sphinx is destroying us. And so they say, what's the problem? He says, what's the problem? Like he just shows up and he's this random guy. And they say, well, I mean, he's got this riddle, none of us can solve it, and he keeps terrorizing us and killing us. And he's like, well, what's the riddle? And like they say you have to go and ask him. So he poses the riddle, and you probably heard the riddle before. It was like, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? Mm-hmm. And it's man, because you crawl, then you walk, then you have a cane. And so he answers that, and it saves the whole city. So they're so grateful to him that they make him the king. And they said, our king has just recently died. So we would like, if you'll take it, we'd like you to be the king. And also, his wife is widowed and her kids are heir to the throne. If you take her, and her kids will be heirs to the throne, and you'll have, heirs, and they'll be the kings of. And he said, yeah, sure. I mean, it sounds. He already had like kind of a royal life over here, and he comes over here and has a royal life over there. He's like, that's consistent, and he's like, he feels like he earned it because he, solved the riddle of Sphinx and stuff. And so later they ended up having a plague in Thebes, and it says, and he gets like this prophet to come in and say, like, what's the cause of this plague? And the prophet says, I really don't want to answer your questions. And he's like, no, seriously, prophet, you're the great prophet Tiresias. Same Tiresias. What's causing this? Tiresias says, if I tell you, you're not even going to listen to me. You're going to be pissed. And he's like, no, I want to know. Are you trying to protect yourself? Do you know the person? He's like, the person you're looking for is you. You're causing the plague. No, I'm not. You're a liar. I'm not a liar. I always freaking tell the truth. I know the future. Just listen to me. No, you're out for yourself. You want me dead for some reason. I don't want you dead. I know the freaking truth. Just listen to me. And then he's like, no, blah, blah, blah. Creon must have put you up to this. He's like, I'm out. I'm just stupid. And then Tiresias leaves. Turns out the parents that he had in Corinth weren't his real parents. They were his adoptive parents. He leaves to get away, and the reason was this prophecy was also made at another time that the son of Laius would kill his father and marry his mother. And that Laius and Jocasta are like, screw this.
Yeah, where did they push him off?
They said that Laius says, just kill him. And then they're like, no, we can't kill our baby. We can't do that. So, like, pierce his heels so somehow he manages to walk. He'll never, he'll just, maybe he'll believe it. Pierce his heels. And then just leave him in the woods. And he'll die. But the person who's taking him out into the woods, he's like, I can't do that. I can't. This is a terrible thing for me to, like, I can't do that. I can't just leave a baby in the woods to die. So he sees another shepherd friend of his. He's like, take this kid in and care for him. And the shepherd, he is actually a shepherd for Corinth, and he takes the kid to Corinth. They raise him as an adoptive son, the king and queen do. That ends up him thinking his parents are over here. They never told him he was adopted. So he goes over here to try to escape his fate, runs right into it. Whoops.
I thought he had the scars on his ankles from being pierced. I thought
He did. In fact, his name is Oedipus because, and don't read too much into it. Like, everybody wants to be like, why didn't they figure this out as soon as they heard his name? Oedipus means swollen foot. It's one of those scenarios where, like, you read Partner's Tale and, like, Chaucer, and one of the characters is named Death, and Death kills our friend. And they were like, who killed our friend? His name's Death. He's over here. Death, where is he? We'll find him. And they're supposed to just accept that they think that sounds like Thomas or Jason. You're not supposed to be like, wait a minute, as soon as they heard Oedipus, why didn't they check his feet? Come on, you're reading too much into it. It's overthinking it. But yeah, he ends up running right into it, figures it out. They say, oh yeah, actually we pierced our baby's heels a long time ago. We heard of this prophecy and we tried to, he was like, did what to his heels? Pierce his heels. His heels. And he goes, damn it, that old injury. She's like, what? He's like, I need to talk to this messenger guy you're talking about. He might actually have something to say. And they talk to the messenger, and then she realizes, she goes, oh, crap. And so she goes and hangs herself. Oedipus realizes the truth. He goes and takes, like, the toga clips. You ever seen those toga clips before? Mm-hmm. And they have, like, a needle. He goes and grabs them off of her dress after she's hung herself, stabs himself in the eye, pokes his own eyes out, and says, all right, everybody, I'm bringing the plague. I got to go. I'm just going to go wander the desert. Any kid want to come with me? I don't know. It's whatever. So he just goes and wanders the desert for the rest of his life. Puts his kids in charge. This is stupid. I don't know this is in the play, but this is like the legend. He puts his 2 older sons in charge because they're the heirs to the throne, instead of Creon, who is Jocasta, his wife's mom's sister, brother. Puts his kids in charge. His kids are named Polynices and Eteocles. And guess what he tells them? Apparently, all this poking out of his eyes didn't teach him wisdom, because he says to his kids, "Here's what I want you to do. Eteocles, you rule 1 year. Polynices, you rule the next, and then y'all just go back and forth forever." Guess what happened? Person who was king first didn't want to give it up. Eteocles is like, I'll just hold on to this. And Polynices is like, it's my turn, bro. And he's like, no, I'm sorry. We're doing well. There's no reason to change things. Polynices goes to his dad, and Oedipus at Colonus and says, Daddy, he won't let me. He's like, say that I'm supposed to be the king now. And he's like, I hope that you just both kill each other. I'm ashamed of you. Why can't y'all just figure this crap out? This is ridiculous. And so Polynices goes to war with essentially all of Thebes because he brings like an army behind him. Ends up getting down to a fight between Polynices and Eteocles. Polynices kills Eteocles. And Eteocles also kills Polynices. It's like a dual death, like a I guess. I don't really.
It's all valuable to before we read this.
Instead of right now. No, it's just because I want that to be that effect where you go like, what? Okay, so all of that happens and then boom. So Eteocles, because when Creon becomes king, because he's like the only relative left of anybody, he says he thinks from the standpoint of like the state. He thinks Thebes. He thinks what happened? Eteocles was a king of Thebes. He honored Thebes. Good. Polynices, what'd he do? He attacked Thebes. We're going to send a message. You don't attack Thebes. If you're against us, you're not for us, you don't matter. So his first kingly act is to be like, give Eteocles the burial he deserves, the nice, covering of the dirt and the libations, which I think is a pouring out of like holy liquid or something like that. And then Polynices says, birds. Leave them to the birds. Leave them to the dogs, birds, whatever. Forget this is Creon always does this. This is a stupid idea too. Like I think what Creon does in Oedipus at Colonus is he says, Oedipus, we need you to come back. Because they've heard a prophecy that wherever Oedipus is buried will end up being blessed. So everybody's kind of like, Oedipus, come to us. Come to us. I think he ends up at Athens maybe? I can't remember. But he ends up somewhere. Oedipus does. It's not Colonus, I don't think. That's just like the name of the place where he stops. But Creon's like, come, you can come back to Thebes. And what he wants to do is make him live his whole life. This is what Creon's plan is, to have him live his whole life just outside the boundaries of the city, in like a shack or something, where they kind of hold him hostage. They don't tell him this. Then when he dies, go like 10 feet over and bury him in the city walls. Freaking Creon. He does the same thing with Antigone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't kill her. Okay, well, just put her in a cave somewhere with some food and she'll eventually die. It's the same damn thing, Creon. You can't cheat the gods. The gods be like, damn it, technicality. What do we do? Zeus, what do you do? And he's like, I don't know. He's got us tied up. It's not like that, So Creon, dumb guy, state. You'd never go against the gods, I don't know. I've just been talking. Let's talk about what do you care about? I set up the background. I think the background we're good on. It's just, and now I'm at the actual play, and there's no reason to continue. We know why Antigone wants to bury her brother because it's not that he wasn't buried. She says family, gods, that's first. Creon's like state and the protection of the state and who honors the state and our nation. Nationalist. That's what's important. I feel like right now we're having. This is irrelevant. Not irrelevant. It's relevant. It's just. I feel like I don't want to piss anybody off. I feel like right now. You want to be pissed off? You want me to piss you off?
Sure. Just tell us.
I feel like right now there's a war. We're having a similar war right now. Whether or not people are actually at war, I feel like they're actually getting along just fine, unfortunately. But you have nationalist tendencies, right? People who are like, America, 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 that's all that matters, America. And you have people who are like, God matters, only what God says matters. But somehow those people are getting along just fine and saying like, it's almost like America is God right now, like the same thing. It's like the Christ who died for everybody really died for America. Have you noticed that? People are equating, it's almost like America's become a religion, and it's the same religion as Christianity somehow. And people are tying themselves to different aspects of Christianity in a strange way. I find it very strange. Not Christianity as much as maybe Old Testament, like Judaism kind of stuff. But
Did you get that presidential test alert on your phone the other day?
yeah, but mine was in all caps. Had a lot of exclamation marks. Something about
We have
Kavanaugh
never-
and Ford, liar Ford, something like
Oh,
that.
no.
I'm
This was like an Amber Alert.
I saw a lot of like memes online where people were like, posting about it.
This was like an Amber Alert, but it
Yeah.
was a presidential alert.
It was really funny. I knew it was coming because I'd read articles about it and almost nobody else had.
Yeah,
Okay.
Some people did, okay.
It doesn't really mean that it comes from the president.
Well, I was sitting there and I felt a vibration in my pocket, and I was talking to a student at that time, and they felt a vibration in their phone, and they picked it
Right.
out, and I went, "Did you get a message from the president?" And they were like, "What just happened? Well, how do you know that?" And I'm like,
I didn't either.
and I was just like, I felt like a magician for a second because I didn't know what was going on.
I know. It kind of makes me feel like we're getting ready to do something like that. Because like, why would they be having tests like that?
You have to. This is why it's important to always read up on stuff and not just kind of guess, because the articles I saw prior showed that this is actually not from Trump's White House. This was started in the Obama era. They've been trying to put this together for a long time.
Oh.
It just happened to be that Trump was the president once it became official and they started. Yeah. So if there's ever a national alert, like not like a school shooting or something like that, but if
No, but like something
Like
that
like a 9/11 happens again,
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be used for.
They
That's
tried
what I
to do this
figured.
last year in Hawaii, and it set off the alarm for like 35 minutes, and they couldn't. Like everybody in Hawaii didn't know if it was real or fake.
Oh my God.
Oh, was that what the Hawaii thing was?
Yeah.
Oh.
It took like 35 minutes for them to actually figure out what was going on, and that it wasn't a test. Yeah.
Do y'all ever had that happen before on your phone? You have your phone is kind of, at some point during the life of your phone, it gets kind of slow.
Yeah.
Like near the end of your life, and like you put your finger toward like say Facebook, but instead you hit like some other like resource heavy app. You go and then like you just keep pushing buttons to try to make that app not open, and it won't open, and you're like trying to, let me do the force close, and you're just waiting like 35-40 seconds, it feels like an eternity, so you can just get back to the app you intended to click. That's what happened to that guy. Right? He's like, button. Oh, I hit the emergency button. Damn it. Oh my gosh. No. Cancel. Oh my gosh.
That's really bad.
Yeah, that's a funny story about that. But yeah, this was something started by the. It's so funny too. It's sad, but like this is how people think. Like I say, actually, this was started in the Obama White House, and some people will go, "Oh, okay, well, that's not so bad then, I guess." Like, and I'm like, come on, guys, seriously, you can't just be pissed off because Trump did a thing and then like not pissed off as soon as you find out Obama came up with it.
I wasn't mad about it.
I was just like-
I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, why are we getting?
I just want to make sure that regardless of who comes up with it, Democrat, Republican, I want to make sure it's not used for propaganda. As long as it's
No,
not used for
sure.
propaganda, I'm okay.
I agree.
Like as long as I'm not getting like Trump tweets in presidential
Yeah.
alert form, I'm fine. As
Like,
long as I'm
it's
getting
an
an Obama say
alert.
we're doing great as a country. I want like messages like that coming to me in my phone.
Yeah, I get enough Beto text messages a day. Like
There are Beto text messages.
Yes,
Where do those come from?
I literally get like senator and like text messages every day, all day. If
I get
oh my
emails.
God.
I don't get anything from Cruz or Beto.
I like those. No, I'm not gonna.
I get a lot of emails. Yeah, they're like, vote for me. I get a lot of
Did y'all hear what happened in Austin where I think it was Austin, but somebody, or maybe it was San Antonio, somebody went around putting in mailboxes, people who had those Beto signs, they put in like these official looking letters that said you must remove the Beto signs from your yard or pay a fine.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But when you really look at the letter that was in there, it said something like, this guy, I don't know, it's something like he got drunk once, I think, or he went to, and there was another one was like,
He called out an actress for being audacious. And then,
I guess. I don't know. There was a couple of little like minor things that had happened over time. It was like, this person cannot become, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this is obviously some sort of propaganda. It's not just an official letter. It would have like official state seals and stuff on it and stuff. But I thought that was a funny news story.
It's hilarious that someone took the time to do that.
And then there was, I think, the Cruz campaign was sending out letters that looked like jury summons to old people.
Oh my God.
And so it said, you've been summoned. And then it says something like, vote for Ted Cruz, like in the lettering part. But it was like, I mean, there's going to be somebody who opens that and
Oh,
goes,
yeah, there's gonna be-
what? I have to vote for Ted Cruz to get out of the jury thing? All right. And they're going to go and they're going to vote thinking that this is the way it works.
That is crazy.
Which is sad, but
But it's so true.
it's so funny. Like millennials, they'll go, "Ugh, I would never be that stupid. I'm just not going to vote." And it's like, okay. That's like, you ever seen Arrested Development? You ever seen that show before?
yes.
You have Arrested Development. There's this one scene I always think it's hilarious. Like, is two people are working this thing called the banana stand where they sell chocolate covered bananas, which makes no sense because they don't even take the peel off first. They cover the peel in chocolate. It's so ridiculous. When you really think about it, you're like, wait a second. They would never be able to eat the chocolate.
I mean, regular chocolate covered bananas are good.
Yeah, but that's not what they do. So they have the bananas, they have the chocolate, and one girl said, oh, this is so boring. We should just quit and go watch a movie or something. And he's like, well, we can't. We have to work the banana stand. He's like, he thinks it's very important. He doesn't want to like go against his dad's wishes. And she says, no, here's what we do. He's like, we could sell a lot during this time. And he's like, here's what we do. We make it look like we sold a lot. She's like, look, all we gotta do, take however much we think we would sell in that time. How much we usually sell? He's like, I don't know, 5. She's like, there you go, 5. She throws the bananas in the trash. She says, and we take $5. Boom, equals out. And he's like, okay. And so they go and they watch a movie. They're coming back later, and he's like, I think you're wrong on that math. I think we actually just wasted twice as much money because we took the money, but we didn't actually sell the banana. We just threw it away. So it's like we threw away the money and we took the money. So it's like $10 is gone. She's like, what? Oh, you're right. And he's like, what? And so I feel like that's a lot of people who are like, they're like, man, people vote stupid. I'm just not going to vote because I don't believe in that. It's like, okay, you're letting the stupid vote count for 2. And you're letting your vote count for nothing. So, go vote.
Yes.
Notice I'm not telling you who to vote for. Just go vote. That's all. Do your civic duty. Vote for who you think is the right person to vote for. It's very important. It's how our society works, guys. Do you know what the voter turnout is like every election? It's very low. We have some of the lowest, I think, in the industrialized world. In the first world, we have some of the lowest voting rates of any nation.
For midterms.
Yeah.
Like presidential is, it's
Oh my word! And I think the midterm primary elections were so low, like maybe 5 to 7% of people actually voted. It was very. Don't quote that number. You know who that would piss off? Do you want to know who that would piss off? It'd piss off Creon. Why? Because he's interested in the state. So let's get back to talking about Creon. It's fun to talk about voting, which is important, but still, we got to talk about Creon. We got to talk about Antigone. I will tell you that I wanted to mention at least 2 things before we get out of here today, and we're not even close to getting out of here. Don't start packing up. We're not even close. If you look back there, the clock, it's 10:20. We got 25 minutes at least. You never know. I can end up going for an extra 15 minutes on accident. I'm just kidding. It's way too long. It's really bothering me. Like I can't see like the syllabus in the background because that's how I kind of contextualize things. So with Antigone, a lot of people do the interpretation, which I think would be popular right now. The interpretation that this one individual girl stuck to her guns, made a decision, and stood up against a king. And that's how a lot of people interpret it. It's kind of like a feminist way of looking at it. And I think that would probably appeal to a lot of people maybe right now who are reading it in that way, who are looking at the Kavanaugh situation, maybe on the other side, where they're saying it's not going the way it should be going. People weren't listening to Ford in the way that they should, and people are more listening to Kavanaugh. But if you look at that, it could kind of be considered a metaphor of like maybe Kavanaugh's Creon. He believes in what he believes. He believes in it very highly. And then Ford, is that the one? Yeah, that's the one who accused it. Ford, who also did like a testimony, she's like Antigone. And so they're both like, she thinks it's more important that the sexual assault, I guess, be considered for whether somebody's going to become a Supreme Court nominee. He considers himself innocent and says like this is just delaying the election of a Supreme Court justice to the Supreme Court. She's like, this is just a farce. So both of them are very stubbornly, you could look at doing this. And the people on one side who could be like, no, Creon was right. Well, I don't know. The end of the play kind of ends with Creon stepping aside.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that he's not right. He stuck to his guns just like Antigone did, but he ends up bowing to the wisdom of others. He ends up taking the advice of others. But Antigone, she sticks to her guns, but it does kill her.
I feel like at the end he's realized he's made a mistake because he hasn't listened to other people.
He was feeling guilty.
I mean, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought he was guilty and he felt like he'd made a mistake and that he shouldn't have done what he did.
then probably the people who would be reading the play right now would probably end up just being more, I guess, on the side of, say, the Ford person, if they were to take this play and like read it in that way.
I didn't see it from a point of feminism. It was almost like it was a respect thing. It was a respect and pride thing. And because Polyneices didn't fight for his country, he fought against it. Creon was like, no, he doesn't deserve to be blessed by the gods in the afterlife. And Antigone was like, no, he does. He's royal. All of my other family got it. I'm going to do it for him too, kind of thing. That's what I saw.
It's kind of, I think it's kind of like, you could almost say that Antigone could also be a stand-in for Christians these days who are, say, against gay marriage. And they say, if you look in the Bible, like it says, like there's a lot of instances where homosexuality is wrong. And so they look at it and they say, we're a nation. Who are we to make decisions that God has already made decisions on? And so they might identify more with Antigone in this case as well, where they say, I want to make political decisions. I want to make the decisions of the state match the decision of God. So like that's why they're so like into not having something like gay marriage be a thing. Or it's interesting that people tie it to abortion now, but abortion was not a Christian issue until around Reagan's time. The Christians were on the other side of it, which is really weird. Like for large part, I think from like the 50s to 60s, if you look. Abortion was considered an issue that almost everybody agreed with, and it suddenly became a Christian issue where they flipped on it. It was very strange. It became like something that they could use as a touchstone issue when they talked about it and said, but these are babies. And they went, at first the church was like, no, it's not. It's not. And then they went, yes, it is. And they went, oh, okay, I guess it could be. And then it became a political issue somehow. But people who like believe in the thing like abortion is wrong and that because it's a form of murder to them, and then same-sex marriage might be, looking at Antigone and saying, yes, that's me, because I stick to what I think my God says is right. The gods, you can't argue with the gods, is essentially what happens in this play, is that she says, I have to do what the gods say, not what you say.
No, I think it's because she really valued family.
Yeah, I took it that way. I don't think.
Now, when it really got down to it in the end, when the prophet was involved, he said,
But I also think that
I
she
mean,
had a big pride
for her
with
brother was-
family.
yeah, I don't think she did it for the gods, but because I think she does
Essentially,
it for
yes,
family
but
too.
morally, no. She
Yeah.
did it because she loved her
The
brother.
prophet is who says, Creon, you can't do this. You're going to piss the gods off.
Right, and you've got to, that's what everybody's sort of saying to him the whole play. So I underlined on like 932, it's like just after like the beginning of the play where we have the whole bit with like,
Where it says, my king.
I think it's after they've already found out that, what now?
Where this guy says, could this be the
Yes.
work of the gods?
That part right there, I'm trying to figure out what this is in response to, but he says, look, we've got to report the facts to Creon. We can't hear the city. Well, that one out in the lot fell on me, condemned me. Oh yeah, it's the guy who says, listen, the body got buried. We tried to figure out who did it. We don't know how it got buried. It just got buried. And then they say, my king, ever since he began, I've been debating in my mind, could this possibly be the work of the gods? Did the gods just bury it? And Creon says, stop, before you make me choke with anger. The gods, you're senile. You must be insane. You say why it's intolerable. Say the gods could have a slightest concern for that corpse. And essentially, Tiresias comes in later and says, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
They think it's wrong to deny burial rights to a corpse.
And they're going to blame you.
Yeah.
You're going to lose your family.
So I do think that there's definitely the family importance there, but it's both family and gods, because the gods wouldn't, the bad crap wouldn't be predicted by Tiresias if it wasn't for the gods.
I just feel like
It's
coming from
Antigone's
Antigone.
point of view.
Yeah.
Yes, Antigone's point of view is more family. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, then I'm gonna change my point of view on my comments.
But it's almost like Antigone knew.
So is Creon actually not related to Antigone if you did that whole entire backstory?
No.
Not by blood.
Okay, so like
Okay.
just by like say so?
Wait, actually,
No.
no, there's a blood relationship. It's like they're not directly blood related. I don't think, well, actually, it might be.
I thought it was their uncle.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
Jocasta's, yes.
Whatever his name is.
Well, look at the characters. It says
Antigone's uncle Creon.
Yeah, actually, it's dad's or mom's brother. She has mom's blood, so yeah, it's a blood
Okay,
relationship.
because I got confused when you were talking about the other guy that was not like the Holy Feet guy.
Oedipus.
That wasn't actually related to them because
Those other people because they adopted him, but he was really related to Jocasta, his mom, whom he married.
Who was related to Antigone and them.
Yes, in fact, Oedipus is the father of Antigone.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
Oedipus is the father of Antigone, Polynices, and Eteocles.
Okay.
so. Technically, Antigone is his daughter and his sister.
And Oedipus did not realize this, but Oedipus then is also related to Creon. Creon is technically also Oedipus's uncle. He just didn't know.
Brother-in-law.
Yes.
Brother, uncle.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all super weird. But it's so weird too because the way this whole thing it's so weird in Oedipus, the play, which I actually prefer slightly.
Compared to this one, you mean?
And I've wondered to myself if I have sexist tendencies or I'm just very myopic in my view of stories, because if you look, our stories aren't all like female centric. There's a lot of male centric stories and like male stories, and I think that might just be a failing of me where I pick the stories that I know I'll have the most talk about and like I identify with more, and I think that what ends up happening is I end up identifying a bunch of
had a lot that were female.
had female characters but still all male. But I mean, I guess most of the writers throughout history that wrote the classics, which is what I'm trying to pick as many as I can, are male writers. I love Flannery O'Connor, but I mean there's not a whole lot of classic female writers because they didn't really get to start writing until Mary Shelley came along and wrote Frankenstein, and then women started and Jane Austen with Pride and Prejudice and that kind of stuff, and until there was enough leisure time for women to be able to write. It had been so long they were just like you're some kind of maidservant or you're a wife, and there wasn't a whole lot of leisure time for women to write, nor would they be encouraged to. It just took a long time. But that feminist reading is one possible reading. I imagine people who are, on the side of religion is another one. But there's another like hidden reading that is not incredibly common. I'm not saying it's uncommon, but it's just not a lot of. I don't think college classrooms necessarily talk about it unless you're getting like to the upper levels. But you probably. I mean, I don't mean to sound insulting. It's just I don't think you've had a lot of opportunity in school to learn philosophy. Like, do y'all have philosophy classes? Not really. But you've probably heard the name Socrates, right? Mm-hmm. Probably heard Plato, Aristotle. Mm-hmm. So Socrates never... What now?
They're in my history book that I'm just for reading over it.
They're boring.
It's not interesting.
Yeah, philosophy is hard to get into.
It's like so many different things, and you're just kind of like...
Oh, it is.
I mean, the interesting thing is people are very interested in religion, and essentially religion is philosophy. It's just a very specific one tied to a god. It's essentially you say, like, we do the things because God says to, but if we just think for a second, like, what if religions, many of them were, you probably, almost everybody in the room, if you have a religious belief, you think that your God's the real one and all the rest were made up. I'm assuming. And if that's the case, you have to think, how were they made up? Why were they made up? And usually it's because they wanted a certain philosophy, or another word we use for philosophy, which is a little bit different but similar, is ideology, where you want essentially everybody to have the same beliefs. And you're like, but how do you make people want to have that beliefs? We'll tie it to a God who will punish you if you don't do it. Oh, okay. Afterlife sounds scary. And so... essentially what philosophy often is an ideology divorced from the idea of religion. And it's not always comprehensive. Philosophy sometimes will just deal with one aspect of what we should and shouldn't do. It doesn't always cover everything like a religion usually does. Like, here's how much sex you should have, here's who with, here's how big your family should be. Religion usually covers a lot of that stuff.
Philosophy is more open-minded. It makes you think about what you should do.
Yeah, so it's often just a lot of posed questions instead of direct answers.
Theory.
Yes. Yeah, it's theory. Perfect. the theory of what we should do instead of here's a list of things you should and shouldn't do. So what was going on right now, and this is pre-Peloponnesian War, I guess, so people are less worried about like death and all those sorts of things, is Athens is just sort of rising, everything's great, everything's going well. They haven't had this huge crisis of tons of people. I think like a third of the people in Athens died in that plague, which is insane. One of which was Pericles, who was the democratic leader of Athens at the time. But this is prior to that, so Pericles is a big deal. At this time, Socrates was kind of young. I don't know if Plato was one of his pupils yet. I think Socrates was 30 at the time that this was produced. And I don't know if you know much about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, but they all had different views. Plato was the student of Socrates, and Aristotle was a student of Plato. But all of them had one central belief that was key to all of them, that they all thought, which was that essentially philosophers have access to this higher world of forms. Have you ever heard of Plato's cave? That concept? For those who haven't, just real quick, it's essentially like there's this idea that Plato came up with where most people are in this cave and their heads are directed in one direction and they're next to other people, but they can't see them. They can't turn their heads. They're fed and they can stay alive and stuff, but all they see are on the cave walls, the entrance is back here, they see shadows on the wall that flicker as the sun goes up and down and things go by outside the cave. So their whole existence is in seeing these shadows on the wall that are just that come from the sun. Plato argued that a philosopher was like a guy who's able to break free of those constraints, realize that there are constraints, and he breaks free of them, gets up, turns around, and walks outside the cave and goes, holy crap. Guys, there's like this thing over here, and it's moving, and there's other things that are walking around kind of like me, but they're different. And there's like this big old thing in the sky that's like super, I can't look at it. And there's like these things that don't move, but they're like all these, I don't know, colors. There's more colors than gray, guys. More colors than gray, and like darker gray. And like a bright thing that makes the gray kind of look whitish. There's way more than that. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? You're insane. Like, no, seriously, guys. Out high, and maybe he comes up with names from eventually. He's like, there's trees and river, and there's a deer bounding, and, you know, I got a little puppy. He's my buddy now. And it's like all kinds of stuff. There's food out there that's delicious, and it's not just to sustain you. And they're like, no, no, no. All there is the cave. All there is the shadows. And they think that's all of reality. So Plato, and I think Socrates and Aristotle like this idea as well, that essentially a philosopher has access to a greater plane of reality. They could have access to what they call was like the universe of forms, where there are perfect forms that exist. We just have to figure out what those are. Like there is a perfect sense of morality. There is a perfect sense of justice. There's a perfect sense of ethics that exist out there. We just have to discover them. And a philosopher is the best capable person to discover them. And they actually, I think a lot of them, I don't know if all of them believe this, but Socrates, Plato, Aristotle was this idea of the philosopher king, where those who are the greatest thinkers should be the ones who lead everyone because they're the ones who figured all this stuff out, and they can then kind of have the people living under it, which we sort of do today. I mean, we have popular voting, but we tend not to just, at least until recently, we tended not to vote for somebody who didn't know anything. We vote for people who've gone to well, actually I have to say that Trump went to UPenn. I mean, it's an Ivy League school. So we vote for people who go to Harvard and Yale, and we're not usually voting for somebody who went to,
BJC.
no, somebody who went to a year of Tyler Junior College and then dropped out, and they're like, make him president, and even Reagan, you might say, well, Reagan wasn't, he was an actor. Yeah, but he was the governor of California before we elected him to president. So, he had a political background. So we tend to vote for these people who are sort of the upper echelons of society, had these great educations because we think that they know more or smarter or wiser because of that. Even if our dads might be sitting at home going, freaking Ivy League schools, nothing better about them. I can go get college education 5 minutes down the road. I don't know. Stupid Harvard, stupid. What do they have? Money. Blah.
God, you sound like my father-in-law.
So this idea of the philosopher king is kind of, we have bits of it left in our society. Now, they ended up being like the big philosophers that we hear about later, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. But there were other philosophers at the time called, I don't know if they called themselves this or we call them this now, but the sophists, where they did not believe in this idea of the universal perfect forms. They looked at the way we are as people. They looked at, does anybody like really hate like pineapple on pizza? Like it's disgusting and just makes you want to gag. And some people were like, I love like Canadian bacon and pineapple. Who likes Canadian bacon and pineapple? We can't even agree on whether pineapple on pizza is a good thing, right? You think it's good, I think it's bad, or I think it's good, you think it's bad. Some of you, I mean,
You like it, really?
some of us in the room right now, freaking, you've got a sweater on your arms. I'm sitting here sweating in my short sleeve shirt. We can't agree on what cold is. Right? I mean, your house is probably 76. At my house, I'd love it to be 68. But my wife, she couldn't have it that cold, so it's 70, 71. We can't agree on what good temperature is. We can't agree on, like, what food tastes good.
Exactly. We're going back to pineapple. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
you
I eat
like
Canadian
it?
bacon and pineapple. It's actually, because Pizza Hut has, like, 2-topping pizza. You can get, like, $7.99 sometimes. And Canadian bacon and pineapple on a pizza, it's 2 toppings that have a nice, like, what do you call it, wealth of
So you
flavor.
like it?
Yeah, I like it's actually not too bad. It's salty with the meat, sweet with the fruit, and it's got a full flavor profile.
I don't like my pineapple warm. I would eat them together, but I don't like warm pineapple. Like, that's not okay.
No, it's got pineapple and olives is good too.
Yeah.
Buddies.
Guys, we're gonna talk about philosophy. Is that exciting?
Can.
Philosophy, pizza. I got opinions on pizza. So,
Talk about this though.
And so how
So-
are these people's fault?
huh?
They're not. If they're
Well,
not
here's the thing he said. He said we can't agree on tiny things. I don't even know that I taste the same world that you do. I don't know that I see the same world that you do. My blue might be your red. I mean, we don't even know that what we're seeing that each one of us sees is the exact same thing. Did you know there's people who can see the ultraviolet spectrum? Like they see colors and the ultraviolet spectrum. And there's people who can't see anything but still relate to the world. So we don't even know how every one of us sees and what that's like. They said if we don't even know like how every single person experiences the world, how can we think that we know the universal forms or could have access to them? We're just people in this world.
And I feel like that makes more sense.
To some it does.
I mean, they both make sense because you're either looking at the bigger picture and like what everything could be,
Yeah.
or you're looking at the individuals and where we are now.
And this is why it ends up being kind of a big debate with this play. Additionally, another thing that the sophists believe, and this makes I can't think a lot of sense when you think about their beliefs there, is that a lot of them were tutors for people like politicians' kids, and they would train those kids to then become politicians themselves. One of the things they would do is train them in oration, train them in public speaking, because that's what they had. They had rhetoric, and what English is technically called rhetoric now.
Yeah.
But rhetoric is really, it used to be spoken. It used to be like you would speak speeches and you would make arguments out loud. It wasn't all written. Today I think we have access to written stuff, which is superior. I think in writing you can read something, read it again, and go, that doesn't make sense. And you can't do that in speech. Have y'all ever noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, I want you to really think, anytime you've ever heard Trump speak to a crowd, if you've ever watched a video, like a YouTube video, when you've seen him speak to a crowd, he's actually great at it. He gets everybody riled up. He gets everybody on his side. It's one of the things that, because people had such political beliefs, remember the Democrats didn't even think it was possible that Trump could win, because they looked at him and went, they were looking at just his tweets or something. Because I think Democrats and liberals are like, maybe they spend more time on technology and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm making that up. And so like they're mostly reading about Trump. They're not watching speeches, right? But there's people out there watching Trump speeches. They're doing it because they like Trump and they were listening to his speech. Like, listen to this guy speak. He knows what he's talking about. And everybody who doesn't like Trump isn't watching him speak, right? I don't remember like a lot of people I know who are like, I'm not voting for Trump, saying they watched an entire 45-minute speech, right? So all they would do is read about it later, or they'd read his tweets, and they'd be sharing that. So that when I watched Trump actually sit and he'd speak to a crowd of people, he's great at it. He's really good at it. He makes everybody feel like he's on their side. And I swear, sometimes I was like, I think he might be on my side. And then I was like, what am I thinking? Quick, go read something. And what I would do is I would go read a transcript of a speech he did. And when you read it, when you read literally what he said to you with his face,
It's not the same.
and read it, it doesn't come off the same. It's disjointed and it's all over the place. And you realize there's no actual, he's so good at the
He
persona.
brings you into the moment.
And see, that's what they used to learn. That's what the sophists were really great at teaching. Yeah, it made a good politician. If we were to take all the presidential debates, write it down what they say, and read it later, we'd go, wow, that person's a moron.
Yeah.
And so is the other one. Like, who do I vote for? Like, nobody? So when you and look too, when you write it, not only that, but it's like the way Trump speaks out loud, but then you read his tweets and it's like all caps and like exclamation marks and fake news, shame, bad. And you're like, bad? Did you just say bad like one word with an exclamation mark? Like, it's like my kid does that. But it's the oration was how they trained people to become a politician. If you could make a good argument, make people believe you. And so the sophists believed, they said if all it takes is one good argument to sway somebody from one side to the next, if you say, this is the thing, and a person goes, well, actually, that's pretty convincing, I believe you. And somebody else says, no, this is the thing. And it's like, well, now you sound convincing, I believe you. He said, if we can't even get people to like agree what's right and what's wrong, and I can sway you so easily, how do we have an access to universal forms? Now, this comes into the play because Sophocles was writing to appeal to both sets of people. Socrates, I don't know if you know this, but Socrates, he probably ended up watching this play when it was put on because he was big in Athens at the time. He probably got into there. And some of these sophists came in and watched it too. Socrates watches this and sees Antigone sticking to her beliefs, believing she has access to a greater truth. She dies for those beliefs. And he's like, that's true belief. That's true belief. She had access to those beliefs. And Creon does the same thing, but he ends up changing his mind at the end, and that almost you could say is when things start to kind of go bad, is when he goes, well, and then everybody's dead. So Antigone's the one you follow.
He waited too long to change his mind.
Mm-hmm.
But the prophet didn't come in until right before
Right.
to warn him, so it's like there's no
But he did.
time.
He was willing to change his mind at that point, and oftentimes in these plays they don't.
So it's kind of okay to kind of have 2 point of views where you are kind of like okay with both
Yeah, that's how I
characters.
feel.
Because I felt that way. I felt like on one
Yeah.
side I was like on her side, but on the other I was on his
side.
side.
Yeah.
I was like,
Well, interestingly, both Antigone and Creon would be on the Socratic side. The people who would be on the sophist side are Ismene and Haman.
And see, and those
He said, just because you're a king doesn't mean you make a great decision all the time.
exactly.
You might be wrong this time. You should listen to wise counsel. And Ismene's like, we don't need to go and bury him. We've been told not to. It will get us killed.
See, I
So that a decision that usually might be good in this case isn't. And sophists are like, they're right.
I didn't like what she was saying because I felt like she was just afraid, and that's the only reason she made the decision that she made.
Do you know? But then later she's willing to die without having done anything.
I know, and that just doesn't make any
She
sense.
takes that sacrifice because she says, you know what, I should have stuck by family, and I'm changing my mind now. She's willing to change her mind.
But
And
Haman does the same thing. He's like, I'm going to stand by you, Father. I'll trust you, whatever you do.
he says,
And then
but
at the end, he's
please
like,
listen to wise counsel.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like she should have stick to the rules, even
Antigone?
Yeah. I feel like had she...
Like she
it
was-
I think that you're supposed to view her as the hero
she's
here.
breaking the rules.
Well, but
You're supposed to view her as the hero, but you could also view the other people, like her, as being
I
reckless.
feel
And
like
the
if she
sophists
hadn't
view her as
broken-
reckless, and the other people
If she
don't.
hadn't broken the rules, Creon would eventually realize his mistake anyways, and that burying the body is what should happen. So she would have eventually got what she wanted anyways, and nobody would have had to die.
But I don't
Maybe.
think he would have.
Because the prophet
You know-
would still...
You want to know what's...
Believe in the prophet at first until.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what's interesting with Socrates and what happened to Socrates? So somebody argued that like maybe, and he saw this play and plays like this and was like, yes, stick to your beliefs. Socrates was, tell me if this sounds like a familiar story. Socrates in 400s BC. I know. Socrates in 400s BC. People said that he was corrupting the youth with his philosophy talks. And they said they wouldn't put him on trial for corrupting the youth. And they said, don't do it, Socrates. He says, no, I'll go on trial. He goes on trial. They find him guilty and say that he needs to be put to death. And so he drinks, I think, hemlock or whatever, and dies for really not having done anything bad. You may think that sounds similar to something that happened about 400 years later to Mr. Jesus. He didn't call him Mr. Jesus, but he talks to a bunch of people. They don't like what he's saying. They eventually kill him despite having not done anything violent or dangerous. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, you have a good day.
Those are the people